Overtime School of Wrestling, Psychological Skills Training, Focus by Coach Shannon as a part of the Overtime Sports Enhancement Seminars from the Overtime School of Wrestling in the Naperville, Illinois, USA. What is focus? Paying attention to your goals, following your strategies, and ignoring distractions. And you can sum those words up by saying this: paying attention to the right things at the right times. That last column there and or rectangle, that becomes a big part of focus, because once we learn how to ignore distractions, which could be a mistake, or which could be someone screaming at us, or which could be anything that gets you out of your normal way of thinking, that is where we can actually replicate and duplicate success again and again and again, and that is what most of this slideshow is about. Trigger words. Trigger words are cue words, or things that you say to yourself when you become distracted, or when you lose your focus, or when you are trying to get back to the place where you can have success again and again and again. Nonetheless, they're words that spark positive actions, and they increase your focus during challenging times. Again, I suggest that they must be practiced during training and then in competition and used again and again. Just like all of our physical skills, and these psychological skills, like a trigger word, for instance, that needs to be practiced, I say, for about 2 to 4 weeks. And that's when we actually become really used to it, if we're doing it in practice and in competitions. And then I think it takes about another 3 to 6 months for that skill to really be something that we can apply on demand. And that's what we're trying to do with all of our skills, whether they're psychological and or physical. We're trying to be able to use them on demand. I want to go back to the middle area there, increasing focus during challenging times. That becomes important, because when we do become distracted, this is the moment where either we get frustrated or we become upset, and depending on how much time we have, if it's a second or 2 seconds, all it takes sometimes is like a half a second to get distracted, and then that can maybe determine that particular movement for you if it's a wrestling skill that we're doing. So when our mind's eye becomes distracted and or because of a mistake or challenged by something that we did not want to happen, we have to quickly be able to use words to get us back to where we need to be so that we can perform at a high level. Sample trigger words. Again, if you know what trigger means, and if you don't, here's a somewhat of a crazy example, but I think it's effective for this trigger, and this is what I want you to kind of think about. Pistol shooting actually has a mechanism where you put your finger at. When you pull that mechanism, it's called a trigger. The whatever's inside of that pistol actually comes out, and I think that's graphic in one sense, but it also helps you kind of see what I'm talking about in terms of a trigger word. Now, all of the words on that page are things that I've used in the past, either with myself and or with my athletes. And it's not so important that you memorize all of the words on this page. What is important, though, is you understand that these are words that you can use when you do become distracted by everything that's in the environment that's not helping you become successful in that particular moment. Again, I suggest you need to determine what words are going to work best for you, and then start using these words on an ongoing basis every single day when you become distracted, when you become upset, when you get taken out of your focus of doing your very best. You need to have words so that trigger these emotional responses so that you can perform at a high level. Again, these are examples. I think you need to come up with your own examples and use them every single day in practice and in competition. There are a couple different types of focus here. We're going to focus on 2 of them, and those 2 types of focus can be broken down into several categories, 2 for the most part. Width, and you can look at the top there, it gets very narrow, and that narrow is one part of width, and the broad would be the other example of width type of focus. I'm going to give you a couple of examples here so you can understand what I'm meaning. If you're wrestling in a match and you hear your coach talking, that would be, depending on what you're doing there, that could be very narrow versus hearing everyone in this, crowd talking. If you can hear everyone in the crowd talking, that may be a challenge there, because now if you're focused on those words, everyone in the crowd is saying versus what your coach is saying, now you may not necessarily be focused on the match that's actually in front of you. So the narrow example there would be hearing what your coach is saying. A broad example of hearing in that sense would be hearing everything that's going on. Another example would be hearing the whistle that's on your particular mat. Or understanding the buzzer that's on your particular mat. Again, that's very narrow in a tournament setting. Sometimes there are 8, 10 mats. Junior Nationals, there's like 20 mats there. Focusing on all of the other whistles that are in that competition except for the one that's on your mat could be very distracting for you, and it could be overwhelming for you unless you know how to black out all of those other things. And most athletes are aware of doing that, and that's what this kind of slideshow was about, teaching you how to narrow down your focus and get what you need. So that's another example of a broad versus narrow focus where you can hear everything in the actual competition versus hearing the things that are, relevant to you, things that you need to be paying attention to right now on your mat. The other type of focus is direction. You can kind of use that same example as you did last time. I throw the internal in the middle because that's actually what's going on inside your own head most times. Or external would be things that are going outside of your own head. Okay, here are two examples. Self-talk and or cue words and or trigger words, those would be things that are going on inside your own mind. And there are a couple different examples within the internal realm of directional focus there. You can be saying the right things to yourself or things that are kind of distracting you, like, am I good enough? Am I the right person? Did I do the right training? Those are all internal types of focus there. And that's self-talk or trigger words or cue words. I like to suggest that the cue words and trigger words and self-talk, that needs to be positive. Again, this is a directional type of focus, and it's coming from inside your own mind. If you notice that stuff, that talk, those words, those triggers are, they're eliciting a negative response, you can stop listening to it. And you can turn it to external focus if you're in a competition and you have someone coaching you. That focus would be outside of your own brain. Now you can listen to what those words are. Typically your coach is trying to help you get better, so they'll be saying things to you that'll help you achieve your goals. On the flip side of things, depending on your personality and your coach's personality, sometimes some athletes, and I've had this happen, where they don't necessarily like to hear what their coach is saying. And if that's the case, then you need to learn how to internalize what's going on and only hear things that are positive. And I was able to do this as an example. When my coach was saying things to me, I could only actually hear things that were going to help me get better. If I didn't feel like it was necessary for me to hear, I couldn't even hear it. Certainly I couldn't hear the crowd. The only thing I could hear were things that were coming out of my coach's mouth that made sense. Again, so that was a directional focus. If I wasn't hearing him, I had my own internal thoughts and processes going on, saying I need to do this or I need to do that. Again, those are two different types of focus, where they're internals coming from your own brain or external coming from outside your own brain, and you're kind of focused on and listening to it. Summary. I want to just go back a little bit so that you understand those different types of focus. It's not so important that you understand precisely what is going on or who's saying what. What is important, though, is that you learn how to use what is available to you. What is a relevant cue? What is going to help me achieve at my very best level? If you understand that, now you're sort of suggesting, I'm tying in this slide with the last one, now you're sort of suggesting to yourself, okay, is that distracting me? And if it is distracting me, what do I need to do right now to compete at a high level? And if you go to the left there, you can sort of see where it says build a pre-competition focus routine. That's extremely important. Just like we build a pre-competition exercise routine, right? Most people do some type of warm-up before they go out there physically. Hopefully psychologically they're saying things to themselves to get them ready. But I'm suggesting that you can use that same sort of strategy with your mind, right? When we've got things that are, once we identify what actually distracts us, now we can build, strategies in order to help us become more focused when we do get distracted. If we do that again and again and again, so if a negative thought comes up in our head, we can quickly reframe it so it's a positive thought. A negative image comes up in your head and you can quickly reframe it into a positive image. This will only happen if you practice it, right? You've got to develop a pre-competition routine so that you are able to, block out things that are not going to help you compete at a high level, or it could be during training, and focus on the relevant cues, which could be a trigger word, which could be an image, which could be a thought that are going to help you compete at a high level. I say if you do this in practice on a daily basis, after 2 to 4 weeks, once you develop your routine, now you may be more inclined to have this mastered in about 3 to 6 months if you're doing it every single day in practice and you're doing it in competitions. Now, when these moments come up that you did not necessarily plan for, well, guess what? You have planned for them because you've developed a pre-competition focus routine that's going to help you get what you need when you do become distracted, when you do have a mistake happen, when something that you may be focused on in the past or the future. And here is an example of that. The last time I wrestled this person, I got headlocked. Well, that's not necessarily what you need to be focusing on right now at this very moment. And if you build a pre-competition routine for when then again, you have to know what actually distracts you. Once you understand what that is, now you can build your pre-competition routine to get you what you need. Or you're focused so much in the future. If I wrestle this match, I'm going to beat that guy, I'm going to beat that guy. Well, that may not necessarily be relevant for you. And if you notice that you're doing that, you design your pre-competition routine for areas that you know actually distract you. And when you do that again and again and again, I say 2 to 4 weeks in the beginning and then about 3 to 6 months for complete mastery, you will be closer to success. Overtime, School of Wrestling, psychological skills training, focus, acknowledgments. All of the information presented in this slideshow was derived from the United States Ski and Snowboard Association Elite Performance Series Sports Psychology in 2004. Again, I always like to point out when I get to the end that I was actually a USA national team coach for 8 years at the United States Olympic Education Center. During those 8 years, I traveled all around the world to places like Mongolia, China, and Japan. Not only did I learn a lot of different wrestling strategies in terms of techniques and periodization and those things, I also learned a lot of psychological skills training that I certainly employ with my athletes now, and even back in the day when I was a USA national team coach. What also is important is there are resources like this here. There are resources that if you want to actually get better at something, you can. And the only way that you will get better at something is you have to identify what your strengths are and identify what your weaknesses are. Certainly you want to maintain those strengths, and the weaknesses you actually want to develop them into your strengths. If you do that over time, you will be closer to high performance training, psychological skills, and with your physical skills. Thank you.